It is Locked On Jazz for the 7th of February. Trade deadline week is here with the deadline the 10th. How about 18 names to consider for the Utah Jazz? Clippers and Blazers have already gotten at it. What did that tell us? A good win on Friday we'll look at, and a Trends Monday shows a brand new NBA. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can subscribe with that little button for free, and then also hit the bell notification and let you know every single time we launch something. Otherwise, we are free on all other podcast platforms as well. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. One little note before we dive in, I did spend part of yesterday at Alta with Boris Diaw. He's the best. Just if you're wondering how he is, he's super. And he is just living the life that all of us would dream we would live. He's sailing in Tahiti and Bora Bora and skiing in Utah and living in France. He's amazing. Just a quick update on former Jazz players. Good morning to Lee and Paul and PCF and Neil and Tyler and Brandon and Derek and Christopher. Thanks for joining the live broadcast today, chat room. 18 names that we went over the last 3 weeks, when we went through every single NBA team. I think it was 2 weeks. We went through 10 shows, went through every single NBA team. I thought trade deadline week, we'd review it. So starting in the Eastern Conference and kind of looking at what the possibilities are for the Utah Jazz in possible trade situations. In Atlanta, I did not include Danilo Gallinari. I just can't see us adding an aging Gallinari, $20 million for next year. So I'm not including that, and I just don't see us adding DeLon Wright, so I left that out. Boston, you've got Marcus Smart's been talked about. I don't know if there's a real interest there. And you've got 4 years, $14 million left on that deal. So, remember from a Jazz standpoint, here's our contract situation of players that, I guess you would consider. I'm just going to ignore Gobert, Mitchell, and Conley and then include everyone. Bogdanovich has another year left at about $19 million. Maybe it goes down a little bit, but it's in that range. Ingles is a free agent at the end of the year. He's at $13 million. You can bring back that number. We're $14 million over the cap, so we're limited what we can do there. Clarkson's $12 million, and we gave him 3 years, so he has 2 years left after this year. Royce O'Neal is about $9 million with 2 years left. Rudy Gay, we gave him 3 years as well, so he's got 2 more years at about $6 million. So those are your kind of movable pieces. And then smaller pieces are Azubuike, Pascal, Whiteside, Hughes, Butler that you have to move. Marcus Smart is at $14 million, 4 years left on his deal. You'd have to be willing to take in that, and you'd have to send money back. It would have to be, in some way a move. We're not going to take Marcus Smart for Joe Ingles and add $14 million onto our books for the next 4 years, I don't think. Keep that would be Josh Richardson. I'm 1 year, $11 million left is available. He's all right. He wasn't great in Dallas. He's been pretty good in Boston. He was good in Miami. He's at least long and lanky and can defend and more athletic. Dennis Schroeder is supposed to be available. I don't see how he matches for us at 1 year and $6 million. I'm just including every name we talked about. There was no one on Brooklyn. We get to Charlotte and there's Gordon Hayward. 2 years left, $30 million each. Like, is he still have it? Is he the piece that puts us over the top? You're only doing that deal with a lot of pieces. You're saving them money. So you're probably doing, some sort of deal where they are getting off money to do that so that they can set it up to really build for the future around LaMelo Ball and Bridges. and whatever other pieces they think are necessary for that. Terry Rozier's floating around there at a 5-year, $17 million. Again, I don't think that's something we want to have 4 more years of that, but I will say that's a former Danny Ainge player who he didn't keep. But, again, if Charlotte's actually trying to redo their books a little bit to build around LaMelo Ball and Bridges, then you actually have Miles Bridges. I think I said Mikal. Miles Bridges, and maybe you have something there, but I'm not sure. Cleveland's made their big move. We'll dig into that. C.D. Osman's around at 2 years, $8 million. I don't think they're about to move that. Jeremy Grant's the much talked about player, 1 year, $20 million contract. So for the Jazz, you're coupling together, Joe Ingles, a lot of picks. Supposedly Detroit wants 2 first-round picks. Karis LeVert, this is relevant, just got a first rounder and an early second, and Jeremy Grant's probably better than Karis LeVert. So, worth noting, Cleveland paid a mid-20s first rounder and a second round pick. Our difficulty is a lot of our picks are already out. We moved a pick with the Derek Favors deal. And so for us to start giving, you can't trade back-to-back first round picks. And so you're suddenly having to move. You're going to move. You have to move down the line. We just don't know where we're going to be down the line. And so it gets very risky. If we're going to make a deal at this point, which involves a bunch of draft picks, we better know that this increases our chances to win it considerably. And we'll talk about, kind of where the league is before we're done today. Because I think that's a really interesting aspect to all of this is kind of where the league is. Indiana, Miles Turner's a 1 year, $18 million deal. A bunch of people floated this as like this interesting idea of us going big again. It's actually interesting. I don't know how we do it or if it really works or if you try to implement that in the middle of a season and he's going to be a free agent worth too much and you'd really be just renting. He's got 1 year, $18 million left. So you do it for another year. It's a wild concept. You're starting Turner and Gobert, you're mammoth. You have the 2 best rim defenders in the NBA. Then, somehow to get Turner to play 26, 28 minutes a night, you're going to have to play them together for 14 minutes a night. You might be back to the terrible spacing of the Favors era, though Turner can shoot the 3 adequately. He can shoot it. It doesn't always go in. We see the Knicks tonight. Nobody on Miami, nobody on Milwaukee. Alec Burks, 2 year, $10 million. I actually did a podcast with Locked On Knicks about it. They wanted draft picks. That would be if the Knicks were trying to clear space in some way. He's got 2 years, $10 million left. You do the Joe Ingles on that. You save $3 million this year, and you get Alec Burks. That's an interesting one. But here's the big question on the Jazz. They're so far over the tax with $14 million. Joe Ingles, they hadn't given Joe Ingles an extension because I don't think that slot of money was one they expected to spend next year, or it's how they wanted to spend that one. And so is Alec Burks, do you really want to have $10 million of Alec Burks or anyone for that matter in Joe Ingles' slot next year? That's the difficulty here for the Jazz is considering the fact that they're currently $14 million over the luxury tax. If Joe Ingles' contract could come off the books and the tax is reportedly going up, the Jazz are kind of back under the tax next year and don't get into the repeater. And then if they want to sign a mid-level exception or something, they can without going too far over the tax. If you trade someone for Joe Ingles' slot with years left, that's your move for next year. You're back to $13, $14 million over the cap. You're probably not signing a mid-level exception. So that's your move for next year. Is Alec Burks or someone of this sort enough for that move? Marcus Smart, that's your move. Like, you're done. If you're trading Joe Ingles for Marcus Smart and Boston gets out from under the contract and you're probably giving up picks or something. I don't know. 4 years of contract's an awful lot on Marcus Smart. So, these are complicated things, but that's what you have to kind of realize is that's the impact of this. We're not entirely sure you want to do that. Orlando has Gary Harris, who is a free agent at the end of the year, $20 million. You'd have to just believe Gary Harris changes who we are as a team. And that he brings a toughness and a defensive prowess and his knees are still good enough to do that. And you're willing to trade. And Orlando would have to somehow want somebody with a contract left for the Jazz to be able to do that. Probably have to give a pick as well. Siakam was the wild card we talked about. I don't think Toronto's playing pretty well. I don't think they want to undo their team, but 2 year, $33 million. And we don't actually have expirings because Clarkson has 2 more years left. Rudy Gay has 2 more years left. Boyan has 1 more year left. It wouldn't really give Toronto any flexibility. I can't see that. Dinwiddie in Washington's been talked about a lot as a 2 year, $17 million left on his deal 2 years after this year, and 17, that's a lot. Again, same concept. Unless, in that case, you're moving Clarkson and Rudy Gay for Spencer Dinwiddie, and you think that makes us a better team, and you're out, and the Jazz are advantageous that they're out from under 2 years of Clarkson and Rudy Gay's contracts. But I don't know that, though Washington supposedly wants off Spencer Dinwiddie in some way. We talked about Dallas. They're the most interesting team going to the deadline. They have contract problems, both with Brunson and Dorian Finney-Smith, that they can't re-sign them next year. So you send them somebody who they can re-sign because they have the bird rights, or who has, more importantly, who has years left on their deal. It's not that they don't want to go in the tax. It's that they can't really offer those guys what the market's going to offer them next year. And so, there is some value that if you send them something they want for one of those players, it's advantageous for them. So that's a little bit of an interesting possibility there. Eric Gordon has been talked about. He's got 2 years, 18 left. This is the same thing. You put the Joe Ingles contract with, Rudy Gay to get to 18. I'm just quickly making up 18. And to get to Eric Gordon, but you now have 18 million on your books for each of the next 2 years. And that's the same. That's your move. You're done now. And is that really what the Jazz want to be able to do? And is that the move that they want to, that they're willing to make there? An interesting little thing, in Memphis has too many players. They're going to have to move someone. DeAnthony Melton has 2 years left at $8 million each. Defensive minded, probably could teach him how to shoot, probably could teach him how to ball handle. I think he's interesting. I don't know that Memphis wants to trade with us, and I'm not sure what the cost on that would be, but it's interesting. Josh Hart, 2 years left after this year at $12 million. It's interesting. Kendrick Williams is going to be traded for great value at 1 year, $2 million, because he does a lot of things, and Oklahoma City has a fine there. And then the final pieces of this puzzle, Harrison Barnes, 1 year after this one, $20 million. Same thing we're talking about. That's your move. That one's pretty good. But you also better figure out a way that you're out from under, you're moving, you're taking in a lot of contract. If you use Ingles on that, you're taking in money that you now have allocated for next year into the cap. And then the one I think is super interesting is Derek White, 3 years, $15 million. That's a bad contract for San Antonio. And would they be willing to get off that one with 3 years, $15 million left? And can we do it where we're moving contract rather than just free agency contract? Quite frankly, I know all of you are asking the next question, what's the deal I think is most likely? The deal I think is most likely is Joe Ingles and some other piece to Oklahoma City, where we then remove restrictions on a draft pick we owe them, and we get under the luxury tax. It's boring. It's good for the franchise, but there's no reason to have Joe's contract on the books when he's not going to play, pushing you over the luxury tax. So that's the deal I think is most likely. I'll take some of your questions coming up, and also look at the deals that already went down and what the Clippers just did, what Portland's doing, what Karis LeVert's deal tells us, as well as take some of your comments as we continue on Locked On Jazz today. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Today's show is brought to you by my friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. Chevy truck lineup, it's awesome. Silverado and the Colorado, no one makes a truck like Chevy. The Murdoch family's been in Utah for 90 years, and they're not going to charge you more than MSRP. So you get a great deal there. And then you've also got the SUV lineup with the Trax start working its way up to the Equinox, to the Blazer that's just so cool. And then the Suburban, as well as the Tahoe, the great Chevy vehicles that are there for you. So make sure you go check it all out at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. If you want to stop by, feel free to email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. It's funny, this weekend I saw a friend and was doing, and I had a Built Bar with me, and they're like, "What are those?" And they tried the Churro Puffs, which actually are not available anymore, and they were super bummed, and they thought they were amazing. And then I had them try the coconut brownie chunk, and they thought that was amazing. And so, of course, they then immediately ordered using the promo code LOCK15 because they'd never tasted anything like it. I clearly have not gotten to my Built Bar yet today. Built Bar, it is the candy bar that is my protein bar. Basically, that's what it is. The puffs are amazing. I just ordered the coconut marshmallow because I want to try it. New mix box, 12 flavors available that include the Churro Puff as well as the coconut marshmallow puff. So that's a pretty good little packet. Also has coconut. It has coconut almond and raspberry and a bunch of others in the 12 pack. You can also just order 2, coconut brownie chunk and coconut of your coconut, mint brownie and double chocolate, whatever it might be. And whatever you get, you end up with this incredible 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, 4 sugars, and 17 grams of protein. It is Built Bar. Locked 15 is your promo code. All right, a lot of different comments. Let me just quickly scan. Any chance the Jazz could acquire a player into the favor $7.1 million trade exemption as a salary dump and get a first, and then combine the salary and pick with Joe's contract at a $20 million player? Larry, that is working. So yes, that's very creative. That $7.5 million trade exception might allow the Jazz to get inside of another deal that's going down. And then that is a really fabulous way to go to do a deal where you get a $20 million player. Now, the $20 million player, I'm sure you're talking about is Harrison Barnes or Eric Gordon, because those are $20 million players, or even Gary Harris. On the case of Gordon and the case of Barnes, that's $20 million, or even Jeremy Grant, they're all $20 million players. Then that's a $20 million player that's now on your books next year. And so that's great for now, but you've also just taken Joe Ingles' $13 million expiring contract, a non-contract in favors, added $7 million onto our payroll for this season, which pushes us, probably would cost us about $21 million in tax. I think we're about that I think it's 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1 or something like that. I got to go check that out. And then next year would have us over, another $20 million over the tax from where we already are now, because you filled Joe's contract. So from a dealing standpoint, Larry, it's fantastic. Except for the fact that Yorgis is telling me you cannot combine a trade exception and a player to make a deal. I didn't think he was combining a trade exception. He was taking a player in on a trade exception on a dump, then moving that player with Ingles so that's the deal. The deal would be Joe and the player you've just acquired out together. So I don't think he's aggregating in that. That's why I thought it was all right. Yorgis is very good at this. Anyway, the problem with that is you just added $20 million to your payroll off contracts that weren't going to be on the books next year. How do we acquire Jeremy Grant? Here's the question I have for everybody. Did anybody not? I mean, Jeremy Grant's a nice player, but did anybody not see Donovan Mitchell torch Jeremy Grant in the bubble? It's so interesting to me that our fan base is the one that has decided that Jeremy Grant is the end-all answer to perimeter defense. When I watch Torrey Craig's our other one, and I watched Torrey Craig and Jeremy Grant get blistered by Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs in the bubble. Now, hey, it was the bubble, and the bubble's a little different, but I don't think it's super interesting to me that these are the guys. We have that player that is that unbelievable piece, and you guys are sitting there telling me that the guy we've got to go get is Jeremy Grant. Donovan Mitchell went 22 of 42 from the field, 52%, and hit 12 of 21 threes, 57%, and 8 of 9 from the free throw line when guarded by Jeremy Grant in that series. It's really interesting to me that we've just decided, the national media says Jeremy Grant. We have firsthand experience of Donovan just blistering this guy. Now, maybe I can't imagine he's gotten better defensively while shooting more. See that. Truth be told, Rudy's contract killed the Jazz. Can't wait to see what Ainge will do. I don't see that at all, particularly because without Rudy's contract, we are not very good. So I don't see that. Reports that Hawks are offering John Collins for Marcus Smart and Josh Richardson. Jazz can't match that. Nope, we cannot. That would be an interesting deal. That is true. We don't have a lot of bows in our quiver, as they say. I think if we're going to get a deal done that's, first of all, if we got a good offer, here's the game you're playing as a GM right now. The game you're playing right now is if you get a good offer right now, are you willing to pull the trigger right now, or do you wait and see? What I do think is interesting, and the Clippers just did the opposite on this that I didn't expect, is the Warriors, the Lakers, the Clippers, also deep in the tax, pretty limited in personnel wise what they can do. So it felt to me as though there was going to be a limited group of teams that were actually active in the market, so that someone like Sacramento per se, or Detroit with one of these players hoping to get 2 first-round draft picks suddenly has a lack of market, and at the last minute they come back to the Jazz and say, we'll do this. And I kind of feel like that's all we have here, is that Justin and Danny can try to be as active as they want, but we don't have a lot of bows on our quiver. And so I think we have to kind of watch the marketplace, and if somebody gets in a bind, be available for them to make that deal. And that's when Danny's made his best deals, is when people are in a bind. The deal that went down this weekend, the Clippers, I mean, tax is obviously irrelevant. This is pretty crazy what they're doing tax-wise, but that's a great pickup. Norman Powell, I thought, was one of the most interesting trade prospects out there. He does have 4 years, $15 million left, but I think he's really, really good. And then Robert Covington, I don't love, but on that roster, boy, you can use him in a lot of ways. And, Kevin Pelton points out Robert Covington's teams have always played better with Robert Covington on the floor. But they get Robert Covington, who's a free agent at the end of this year, so they're paying the $12 million this year for that. Norman Powell's got 4 years left, and that's really what Portland wanted to get off of. Portland gets Keon Johnson, and then Eric Bledsoe's contract's only got $4 million guaranteed. So they basically got basically an expiring deal out of that. For the Jazz to have, people wondering, why couldn't have we done that? We would have had to get to $28 million, which probably is, Ingles, Clarkson, and some combination of something else. Clarkson's got 2 years left on that deal. Or we're willing to go Bogdanovich, Ingles. I don't know if we like this. I don't know that actually makes us better to trade Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich has a full 18 left on his deal next year, so we couldn't have done anything near what the Clippers did for Portland with expirings. And then I also don't know that we would have wanted to do that deal. So that's kind of my example where we just don't have a lot of bows in our quiver right now to be able to make some of these deals happen. Karis LeVert gets traded for a first-round pick and an early second-round pick. I gotta be honest with you. I don't love Karis LeVert. He's an inefficient player. He's always been low on points gained. I get Cleveland can't score right now with Darius Garland off the floor. I just don't know that the perception of Karis LeVert is the same thing as the reality. But if Karis LeVert's getting you a 20s first-round pick, it does lead me to think that Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Grant, if I'm Detroit and Sacramento, I'm like, okay, my player's way better than that. And Eric Gordon probably might even get you a first-round pick too, though he's older. LeVert's got 1 year left on his deal, I believe. And Gordon's got 2, so maybe Eric Gordon's not a I don't think Eric Gordon is a first round pick yielder in that process. So we'll see. A lot of Jazz get ready tonight to play the New York Knicks. You can get all the fun and lines at betonline.net. The Rams are now a 4-point favorite over the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend. NBA lines tonight. The Jazz are a 7.5-point favorite over the Knicks, despite the fact Rudy Gobert's not playing. That's surprising. Phoenix is an 8-point favorite in Chicago. Wow, that's surprising to me as well. I would not have expected those numbers. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, lines than ever before as football continues to march through the playoffs and the big game. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of your new amazing offers available at 2020 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. You know what I want to check? BetOnline is whether or not the Brooklyn Nets, losers of 8 straight, are still the odds-on favorite to win the NBA title. Now, they are not losing games with their guys. The Nets are plus 375. The Warriors are plus 375. So that's now even. Phoenix is plus 500. Milwaukee's plus 650. Miami and Utah are plus 1,200. and Philadelphia is plus 500. The Nets are still the favorite to win the East at plus 200, with the Bucks at 275 and the Heat at plus 500. And on the to win the West, Warriors are plus 175, Phoenix plus 250, Jazz at plus 550. That's interesting. I like to do trends Monday for you, but I will say I think this is super interesting, and that is that one thing that happened last year that we talked about was all of these teams in the league being able to have kind of an equal opportunity to winning the title, right? Well, that has certainly happened here at an all-time level, because what you suddenly have happening in the NBA right now, particularly in the Eastern Conference, is absolutely no separation between the various teams and what's taking place. And if you look at the NBA standings right now, it's truly remarkable. The number in the NBA standings right now is the Heat are in first, the Bulls and the Bucks are a half game back. The Cavaliers are 1 game back. The 76ers are a game and a half back. They have 5 teams within a game and a half. The West is not the same, but you've had the Jazz dealing major injuries, Dallas kind of being out of it, Denver with major injuries, Clippers and Lakers with major injuries. So it's not the same, but this is the new kind of NBA and where we're heading on all, with just no dominant team. It's what makes the trade deadline interesting, is that I think you have a feeling that you could probably, make some inroads in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. I always like to look at trends. Trends have been weird this year. We haven't done a lot of it because of the fact that COVID has kind of screwed everything up. Boston is over the last 2 weeks is a plus 17, Golden State a plus 13, Phoenix a plus 10, Memphis a plus 10, Minnesota plus 8, and Toronto plus 8. So those are the hot teams in the NBA. Super cold is Houston, Brooklyn, Washington, Sacramento, Portland, and Indiana. The top offenses in the league are Golden State, Phoenix, Milwaukee, Minnesota, Chicago, and Memphis. The top defenses are Boston, Oklahoma City, Miami, Cleveland, Toronto, and Memphis. The bottom defenses are Houston, Brooklyn, Indiana, Chicago, interestingly, with all their injuries, Washington, Sacramento, and San Antonio. And the bottom offenses are Washington, Sacramento, Portland, New York, Oklahoma City, and Detroit. Sacramento's a mess. They're 27th in the league on that. So, anyway, that's kind of where we sit. From the Jazz standpoint, Friday night was a long time ago, so don't want to spend a lot of time. I just thought the energy was great again. You're playing an underman team that's not playing well. The ball movement was great. There was a spirit to the way the Jazz are playing that has lacked this year, and I think that was noticeable. I love the fact that Azubuike has another good game. Did a great job holding in a way that I just never expect him to. Jared Butler and Trent Forrest brought that spirit. So and Eric Pascal's been outstanding. So really cool to see the Jazz kind of getting a deeper bench along the way. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Thanks very much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the day. And we're almost back to full strength, hopefully by the end of the week. Knock on wood that we get there. Right now, go take your second listen of the day. Go listen to Locked On NBA and get ready for the trade deadline with the national conference.